Hi everyone. Good evening. Oh, the lights just come back on. That's very helpful. Um, yeah, I'll start with a very brief introduction to myself. I'm Craig Brooks. I work for a company called Logica, and we're leading on the environmental assessment here. I support specifically the ecological assessments. I have 10 years experience in the ecological consulting sphere. Before that, I was in conservation jobs primarily focused around ornithology. So I ran bird observatories in Scandinavia. It's all very lovely. I have a strong background in environmental assessment, including ecological impact assessments, environmental statements, habitat regulations assessments, and I've worked extensively on NSIPs, so nationally significant infrastructure projects across various sectors, including nuclear new build and decommissioning. So that's Hinkley Point C and B, airport expansions, Heathrow I worked on previously, residential schemes, and on and offshore wind, renewables, and onshore electrical transmission. I'm leading the biodiversity assessment with input from technical specialists where it's appropriate. So I can't do everything. Sometimes there are specialists better placed to go out and do survey work and provide their feedback. So we're taking that on board. So what is biodiversity? It can be defined in a number of ways, but simply put, it's the variability among living organisms from all sources, including terrestrial, aquatic, and marine ecosystems. In planning terms, it's measured via the assessment of habitats and species primarily, with consideration focusing on relevant important ecological features as set out in the CIEM guidance. That's the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management. At Southbrooks, the important ecological features for consideration are the designated sites. We'll get onto those in a little bit more depth shortly, but just briefly here, it's the special protection areas, the SACs, so special areas of conservation, the Ramsar sites, the triple SI, so sites of special scientific interest, the national nature reserves, the local nature reserves, habitats and species of principal importance, ancient woodland, and biodiversity action plans, and then a whole host of rare species that are considered with their various conservation designations, I suppose. So you've got nationally rare, scarce species, legally protected species, European protected species, and species listed on the Wildlife and Countryside Act of 1981 as amended. So the feedback received to date and common misconceptions. We'll go through some feedback first. Via the scoping opinion and phase one consultation, we had some input from Natural England and PINS. One of the PINS comments was that we need to consider the impacts of traffic. So air pollution, bringing all this stuff into the area, we need to consider that. The development also has the potential to overlap with functionally linked land, and functionally linked land is defined as the land outside of designated areas. It's essential for the ecological function of species protected within those sites. So at Southbrooks, the main functionally linked land consideration is for features including identified within the SPA. So it's wintering birds, or there's also potential functionally linked land for great crested newts associated with the SAC within the terrestrial environment. There's also potential for direct and indirect impacts on designated sites via habitat loss and degradation. Again, I'll show you a map shortly where those designations are. So some of the feedback was that we should retain the existing habitats of importance where practicable and follow the mitigation hierarchy, which we obviously will do. And then the approach to our habitats regulations assessments, or HRAs, the initialism you may see, it's been shared with and agreed with Natural England. The Environment Agency did receive it, but they didn't respond to it. I think we're in contact with them, but they just didn't have a specialist to assign to it, I think. Our approach to the overall assessment has been shared with stakeholders and accepted as appropriate. So common misconceptions. Misconception number one is soil development will destroy natural habitats, causing irreversible damage. And I will say that in the wrong environment, any development has the potential to cause irreversible damage to natural habitats during all phases. However, development that's sited primarily within arable landscape has limited impact pathways. Appropriate siting and sympathetic design will help to reduce any such pathways. Misconception number 2 is that solar development doesn't support biodiversity. I would suggest that increasing evidence suggests potential biodiversity uplifts are greatest in cropland, grasslands and barren terrain, and well-managed solar farms have the potential to support increased biodiversity throughout their life cycle, lowering the management of lowering the management of intensely farmed areas and solar parks compared to the surrounding landscape has been shown to increase plant diversity with consequent benefit for a range of other taxa, including invertebrates and birds. In the UK, there is also a requirement to provide BNG, so biodiversity net gain, on all developments to a minimum of 10% as measured by the statutory biodiversity metric. And then misconception number 3 is that solar panels cause problems for many species groups, including birds, insects, and bats. Now, a lot of this is based on evidence from older solar farms. So intensely managed and operated solar farms can and do cause some problems for wildlife. And if biodiversity is not considered properly, it's the layout of and the scale of the paneling is a major concern, mainly for overshadowing, and inappropriate locations or installation methods such as excess concrete footing and lack of provision of habitats tend to be the main drivers of decreases of biodiversity. Though concerns have been raised about species groups seeing paneling as water, referred to as the lake effect. The evidence from bird strikes seems to be coming from the USA, mainly California, where the panels are an older technology and they're essentially mirrors that reflect into a central column. It can't be pinpointed that these are definitely the source that are seen as water, because there are also there's also solar PV in the same solar farm, but it's thought that it's those mirrors that are reflecting as water. The newer technologies and the non-reflective films that are on solar arrays appear to help with persuading the birds that this isn't water. Insects mistaking panels for water and egg laying has also occurred in older solar arrays. And again, the newer technologies seem to help this. And evidence from Solar Energy UK, who monitor solar farms in the UK, have not seen this trend occur widely. There's mixed data existing about bats, some data suggesting that bat activity reduces over solar panels, but beside and along linear features, there's been no suggestion of a reduction of activity. And the latest coming out of Germany shows that where the solar farms are managed, such as the way Southbrooks would be managed, that's led to increases. So that's with low intensity management. So our approach to assessment. So first of all, what we need to do to get our biodiversity assessment in order is set out our zone of influence. So our study area for the project is based on the maximum extent of the potential zone of influence. So that's the area over which impacts on ecological features may be realised. So to do that, we did a desk study for the relevant existing ecological information within the zone of influence from online sources and local ecological record centres. So on here, you've got a number of abbreviations. It's Kent and Medway Biodiversity Record Centre, Sussex Biodiversity Record Centre, and Kent Wildlife Trust. For international, for various things. We looked for internationally designated sites, so special protection areas and special areas of conservation, Ramsar sites. So that was the site plus 10 kilometres, and that was extended out to 30 kilometres for special areas of conservation with bats as the primary reason for designation. That's because they can migrate and move through the landscape further than many other species. Nationally designated sites, so sites of special scientific interest, national nature reserves within the site and plus 5 kilometres. Locally designated sites, so local nature reserves. And then non-designated sites, so that's local wildlife sites, sites of importance for nature conservation, sites of nature conservation interest, and roadside nature reserves. We also looked for habitats of principal importance and the ancient woodlands via the ancient woodland inventory, legally protected and notable species. So yeah, we've got various search parameters there for inverts, badgers, waterfalls, otters, etc. Legally controlled species listed on Schedule 9 of the WACA, so the Wildlife and Countryside Act. So that's invasive non-native species mainly within the site and 2 kilometres. And then we also searched for water bodies, ponds, lakes, watercourses, and veteran trees within the site and 0.5 kilometres. So designated sites. This map shows a few of them, not all of them. Actually, it does show all the designated sites, but we'll get onto one that shows a little bit more detail shortly. So the various buffers. So I think the 30-kilometre buffer is not shown on here. This is a 10-kilometre, 5-kilometre, 2-kilometre. So within the designated sites map, we've got Dungeness SAC, which is designated for annual drift lines, perennial vegetation on stony banks and great crested newts. Dungeness, Romney Marsh, and Rye Bay Ramsar, which is designated again for annual vegetation on drift lines, vegetated shingle, saline lagoons, bryophytes, invertebrates, plants, waterfalls, non-breeding assemblage of mute swans and shoveler and aquatic warbler. Dungeness SPA, designated for winter and birds, including Buick swan, bittern, golden plover, hen harrier, ruff, shoveler, overall assemblage, passage features, including aquatic warbler and wimbrel, breeding marsh harrier, avocet, Mediterranean gull, sandwich, common and little tern. And then we've got the triple SI, Dungeness, Romney Marsh, and Rye Bay triple SI, which includes features of all those international designations which I just mentioned, plus other additional habitats, salt marsh dunes, flora, invertebrates, birds and geographical and geological features. Non-designated sites are also considered, as I mentioned before. They're not shown on this map, but they include Tawney Road Roadside Nature Reserve, which is, if my cursor is available, just in Lydd. Midley Chapel Pastures local wildlife site, Lydd Common, and Pastures local wildlife site also. Just whistle through a few more pictures before I get into what we've been up to. This is the extent of the triple SI shown against our potential development area, which is shown in blue, and then we've got the cable route options shown in red. I should note that actually that previous slide and the next slide are based on a study area of the developable area, not the cable routes as well. So you would extend out further into the marine zone. However, it's inconsequential because we don't see that there's a pathway to effect in the marine zone. So yeah, you can see from here that the triple SI designation does overlap with South Brooks at the moment, but we'll get onto some commitments that we've made about work within those designations a little bit later. Priority habitats within the study area. We've got one priority habitat identified within the developable area, and that's this area over here. It's an area that's identified by the priority habitat inventory as coastal and floodplain grazing marsh. However, the land's been converted to arable cropland sometime between 1965 and 1990, and has just been cropland ever since. It's broken out from its ditches and no longer meets the description of priority habitats. And yeah, as I just mentioned, these search areas are based on the developable area, so I'm not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. Coastal vegetated shingle does continue round, contiguous with the SAC, so you can see this sort of lime green pistachio, I suppose. It follows the shingle all the way round, so the cable routes do go through priority habitat. And I should say no ancient woodland has been identified within the study area. The survey effort to date, so it's been a multi-year thing and it's ongoing. We started with extended habitat survey, so that was UK habitat classification survey across the developable area. And it was an extended UK habitat survey to assess the potential for protected species and formulate sort of our approach to what other protected species surveys we needed to do. That started in 2024 at pace, and continued and was completed in 2025. We started winter bird surveys in November 2023. We did a partial winter that year, 23-24. We did a full winter 24-25, a full winter 25-26, and we'll do another winter. Get onto that again with further work. Passage bird surveys were done in spring 25 and 26 to cover the passage species that are noted on the SPA. Breeding bird survey was done across the entire developable area in 2025. Sampling approach was taken to bat activity surveys in 2025, and that included 4 activity transects and 8 monitoring locations within the developable area. We had a terrestrial invertebrate scoping survey done in 2025 to see if there was a need for further work. And we've done some GCN, Great Crested Newt surveys, so that's habitat suitability indexing and environmental DNA in water courses and water bodies within the developable area and 250 metres where landowner permissions were granted. Badger otter and water vole survey has been undertaken concurrently as part of that extended habitat survey. So this shows the extent of habitat coverage. We're looking at we've got 99% coverage within the developable area. Obviously, the cable routes aren't shown on here, but again, we'll get onto that for further work. This slide shows the locations of the bat transects that were undertaken. The sampling approach was taken based on favourable features, so it was linear features within the landscape which we thought bats would use or were most likely to use, therefore providing us a worst case scenario. The outcomes of the assessment to date, or the survey work it should say, I suppose. From the habitat survey of the developable area, we've had 612 hectares of cropland, 300 hectares of non-cereal crop and temporary grass lays, 40 hectares of modified grassland, 14 hectares of other neutral grassland, that was mainly in arable verges, 6 hectares of developed land, so sealed and unsealed surface. This is the farm tracks and hard standing within the developable area. 5 hectares of set aside wild bird mix and arable margins, so conservation headlands. 2.5 hectares of mixed scrub and a hectare of agricultural reservoirs. There's one large reservoir that's, just a hectare. Habitats that are within the developable area but aren't meeting the threshold of a hectare include bramble scrub, hawthorn scrub, willow scrub, other broadleaf woodland, ponds and reed bed. There's just a smidgen of those habitats just scattered around. Bird survey results to date. So the breeding bird survey recorded 88 species. CBC, that means Common Bird Census. That should be the only initialism that's not got an explanation with it. Of those 88 species recorded, 55 were considered to show breeding behaviours and therefore indicative territories. So we considered that 55 species are breeding within our developable area. 5 of those species are listed on Schedule 1 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act, affording them additional protections. So that's barn owl, Chetty's warbler, hobby, marsh harrier and peregrine. There's 13 species which are red listed on the Birds of Conservation Concern 5th edition. Corn bunting, cuckoo, greenfinch, grey partridge, house sparrow, linnet, lapwing linnet, missel thrush, song thrush, sorry, not song thrush, missel thrush, skylark, starling, tree sparrow, yellowhammer and yellow wagtail. It's a typical farmland assemblage, and most of these records were associated with the linear features within the landscape, so the larger hedgerows. Winterbird survey has identified areas of limited interest within South Brooks A and E. This was mainly aggregations of greylag and Egyptian geese, with few records of wading birds. SPA features recorded, so that's the species which are noted on the special protection area. Notation included peaks of 28 Buick Swan, one hen harrier, and a flock on one occasion of 2,900 golden plover. Whilst that sounds like a lot of golden plover, golden plover are very numerous. So that's well below the threshold, the 1% threshold, which is noted on the SPA designation. Overall, the assemblage features wildfowl and waders were also recorded in low numbers, and the distribution is thought to be linked with water levels and crop type, with the water bodies adjacent to South Brooksay, so around Scotney Court Farm, appearing to host the majority of wildfowl interest. Small numbers of farmland birds during the winter were spread widely, preference shown to areas of set-aside. Sorry, I've just got something come up on my screen wanting to restart me, so I want to postpone that. Yeah, so we had yellowhammer, corn bunting, skylark, linnet, tree sparrow, and reed bunting. Passage surveys were extended in April and May, so beyond the wintering period. They showed similar results to the winter bird surveys, although reduced numbers as the birds left the area. And there was no notable peaks in activity observed, and no species noted on the SPA during the passage period were observed to be utilising the site. Those small numbers of whimbrel, where groups of up to 5 individuals were observed flying over the area. Bat results. So we had a minimum of 8 species identified during the survey: common pip, soprano pip, Methusias pip, myotis, so not down to species level, nocturnal Ceratine liseless, and brown long-eared. 82% of the static records were of common and soprano pip, with 11% attributed to Methusias pip. Activity, as you would expect, was linked to linear features within the landscape, hedgerows and drainage ditches, which appear to provide key foraging and commuting routes. No roosts have been identified within the developable area, and there was no pulses of activity identified within the migratory period, particularly for Methusias pip. So we extended into October to see if we could capture that, but nothing was seen. Invertebrate scoping surveys were done. They identified flower-rich verdures with potential importance to foraging bumblebee within the site, with large garden bumblebee observed. The site was not considered important for other terrestrial groups due to the habitat uniformity and large-scale arable practices. I must say that's within the developable area, not the cable routes. The sewer systems may be of value to key aquatic invertebrates, medicinal leach. However, embedded measures are in place, which suggests there's going to be no negative impacts on aquatic fauna. Badger-otters, watervoles. There's evidence of occupancy throughout for badger within ANC. There's sets and incidental records, foraging signs all over the place, and several roadkill individuals noted. There's been no signs of otter to date, though there is considered to be suitable habitat for commuting and foraging. No suitable habitat for halts been identified. And then we've got waterfall records returned via the desk study and suitable habitat identified within the ditches and sewers. And we've had actually presence confirmed within South Brooksay. Just mindful of the time, so I'll start to whistle through these. Desk study records were returned for some reptiles, common lizard and 2 grass snake. The rough grassland within the area, so arable vergers, are the best potential area in the developable area for reptiles, but the large arable landscape is not really considered. Reptiles aren't really considered to be a big issue. The largest area of potentially suitable habitat is within the arable margins of South Brooksay, and no reptiles have been observed during other species surveys. A GCN survey, so great crested newts. So we identified all the potential crossing points of ditches, which we're currently looking at. This is worst case scenario. So the little black boxes on here show ditch crossing locations or potential ditch crossing locations. And then there's a few ponds as well within the developable area, or 250 meters of it. We went out and did habitat suitability indexing and eDNA of those water bodies or water courses that we considered suitable. So some of them we got to and they were dry, some of them we got to and they were just completely unsuitable for other reasons. They were surveyed in 2020, in June 26. 13 samples were taken for eDNA. That's 5 from ponds and 7 from ditches. This was due to landowner permissions and lack of suitability, so dry water bodies. We're waiting for the results there. So those results have gone for lab analysis. Commitments which we've made following our initial sort of data and while we're building the project. There's been a commitment to no above ground infrastructure within designated sites. So that's a triple SI. Mainly, it overlaps with the developable area, so there might be some cabling there, but there's going to be no overground infrastructure there. There's a commitment to utilise existing infrastructure as far as practicable, so utilising the existing tracks, etc. Overhead lines were previously considered as a potential route for the cable connection. That's been removed from the proposals due to the impacts it would have within the designated areas, namely the SAC and the amount of shingle we would have to move. Standoffs from ecologically sensitive habitats, including watercourses, hedgerows, tree lines, and woodland by at least 10 metres, except at points of crossing. £4,000 has just been provided to the Bumblebee Conservation Trust via the Community Sponsorship Fund to help fund the Bumblebee Champions of South Kent Marshes project. There is also a commitment to more than 10% BNG across all unit measures, so that's area-based habitats, linear habitats, and watercourse units. That's via habitat creation and enhancement, and that BNG will be delivered on site. We're not looking to offsite any of this. The creation of additional enhancement features, including temporary scrapes, pools, and refugia and hibernacular, should pick up some. It's just additional enhancements above and beyond what we're pushed to do. We're sort of doing that, and should say we're also working with local partners, stakeholders, to identify local conservation interests, and try to work with them to make it better. The likely potential effects that we've still got at this stage. So because we haven't got a finalized design, we're still having to make some assumptions. There remain 2 potential likely significant effects. So those are temporary land take and habitat degradation during the construction phase within the designated sites. That also concerns habitats of principal importance and species of principal importance, and upon EPSs as well. So there's potential impacts because we don't know the engineering solutions for cabling, for example. There's potential impacts to GCN, Great Crescent Newts, medicinal leach, and a few other features. However, we're confident that by the time we get a design, we can work away from these potential significant impacts. And then there's a consideration for permanent land take and habitat loss and degradation associated with the presence of infrastructure during operation. The impact potential remains within the SAC. So this is to do with the loss of vegetated shingle. So we're working at the moment to look at engineering solutions for the best possible way to get a cable into the point of connection at Dungeness. So we're engaged with Natural England via the DAS system to work with them because they've worked within the area for decades. So we want to understand what's worked, what hasn't, and what we can do if we are going to connect to Dungeness. How can we make that the best case scenario, I suppose. Further work needed ahead of the ES. So to finalise our assessment and habitats regulations assessment and the BNG assessment, we need a bit more work done. We've got some surveys going out shortly for looking at macrophytes and aquatic invertebrates in the ditch networks. We've got another full winter of winter bird surveys. We have to do river condition assessment on 3 main watercourses which cross through the developable area at the moment. We're looking at a fish habitat survey as well, vegetated shingle surveys along the cable search areas, and then UK habitat and condition surveys on the gaps within the site boundary where potential impacts could occur. We're continuing to engage with Natural England and the EA and other local stakeholders, so Kent Wildlife Trust, RSPB, nearby developers, to understand local projects Yep. So yes, whistle through. Hopefully it didn't take up too much time. Rebecca,
No, that's great.
over
Thank
to you.
you. Lovely. Do you mind if you would stop sharing your screen and then we can see each other? We've
Yeah.
had a good few questions come in over the course of the presentation, so I'll read those out. So they did come in during the course, so if they've maybe been picked up later in the presentation, it was helpful if you could restate it just for the, helpful for the recording. But they might the original response may have been in there somewhere. So I've got one from John. I think indeed the ones all to date are, I won't read out every time, but I think they're all from John. So thank you, John. So John says in the preliminary environmental information ecology section, the term buffer is used rather than zone of influence in the study area column. This is misleading as it could imply a protected boundary or barrier between the site and the extent of the buffer, especially as buffer is used in this way further within the document. Why isn't zone of influence used throughout? I had a quick look at this, and I think it refers to where the zone of influence is the site plus a kilometre or 5 kilometre buffer, and those two things together create the zone of influence. But I don't know, Craig, if you want to maybe expand on that.
Um, no, I think that's correct. There's no reason why we have done that. And if we're identifying a buffer for our survey or study area, that would constitute the zone of influence or the potential zone of influence. I'm not sure there's anything else to add to that. And please do add a further question if I've misunderstood.
No?
I think, yeah, the buffers do help to identify the potential zone of influence, and those were set out in one of the early slides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's possibly the dual use of buffer in the section, buffer
Okay.
being the buffer from the site, which creates a zone of influence, and then buffer maybe as a mitigation measure as well. So I think maybe just as a language point about using buffer twice.
Okay. So buffer from sensitive ecological receptors, for example.
Mm.
Yes. Okay. No. Yeah. We could just call them standoffs. It would be a 10-meter standoff from ecologically sensitive areas. Um, yeah. The buffer is simply to identify areas. It's not supposed to be taken through to the assessment. That's the zone of influence.
Okay. All right, make a note of that, and we can record that as maybe
Yeah.
something we can change in the environmental statement. Thanks,
Yeah.
John.
That's fine.
Then there's a couple about surveys, which I'll group together. So it might be that these have been covered, but I'll just read them out, and if you can maybe just go through them, so they are a little bit different to what we've covered. So will there be more breeding bird surveys, and if not, why? And the same question, or sort of related question, are you planning to cover surveys for species of principal importance? And if not, why?
So there won't be further breeding bird surveys because we've done 100% of the developable area, and we feel like we've got sufficient coverage for what we're going to take through to assessment based on the design and what we're going to do as part of our assessment. We feel we've got plenty of room for any potential mitigations for breeding birds. It's not a really big issue. The biggest issue for breeding birds is, I suppose, skylarks, which we believe we've got enough land available to mitigate. So that's why we won't do that. And you can't, well, species of principal importance. There's lots of species of principal importance, and they often sit within habitats. And if the habitats aren't there for those species, you wouldn't do surveys specifically for them. So you have to sort of stop it somewhere. So we didn't do, for example, dormouse surveys because there's no dormouse habitat. We didn't do white-clawed crayfish surveys because there's no white-clawed crayfish habitat. Um, so we did take that into consideration as we were scoping our surveys. But you can't survey for everything. We considered habitats principal importance, because if there are species of principal importance, they'll often be within those or
Thank you.
better quality habitats, which just don't seem to occur. We've got more than 900 hectares of farmland, and quite a lot of that's intensively managed. So it's
Thank you.
it's based on the potential impact pathways. That's how we scope our surveys. It's if there's a potential impact there, pathway there, we will do surveys for it. And at the moment, we haven't identified any potential likely significant effects. That's why.
Thanks. And I was just gonna go back because I think John's added some follow-up. I'll just go on to those. So John says harvest mouse, brown hare, hedgehogs are species of principal importance.
Mhm.
How have you scoped these out? Suitable habitat occurs for these species.
It can all be dealt with within the design. Um, is basically that it's the dealt with via design. We're not going to go in and build and impact um, hedgerow hedgerows hedgehogs. You know, they will have biodiversity enhancements inbuilt, so there'll be an increase in suitable habitat for them. Yeah, so we don't see a potential impact pathway.
Okay, thank you. Another question from John. So about otter surveys.
Mhm.
So John says, for the otter surveys within the 250-metre extended area, the ecology section just mentions looking for halts. Presumably the survey would also cover checks for signs of otter.
Yeah, it also looked at signs and couching. Um, we didn't find any. We can't obviously rule out that otter could move through the landscape given the amount of riparian habitat available, but we haven't found any potential halt locations. So that's about, again, what would you do if you did have them? And the mitigation is mainly around disturbance to otter. Obviously, we're not going to be directly killing any, but the main mitigation is around disturbance to halts up to 200 meters outside the development area. But yeah, we've not found any signs yet. We did look for them. Sorry if that wasn't clear. So yeah, badger, otter, and waterfowl were all looked for. I say sign of badger and waterfowl occupancy has been found, but no signs of otter yet.
Thank you. As a comment on one of the slides where you went through the results of your bird surveys, and I think it was about the correct me if I'm wrong, maybe the breeding birds. But John felt that it was not a typical farmland bird assemblage for Kent. I think we had a bit which said that the results showed a typical farmland bird assemblage, and he thought it wasn't.
Yeah, it that that's going to have to just be an opinion. I think we need to look at what's a typical assemblage. I think there's a couple of species there that are specialist. Tree sparrow, we can't discount those. They are quite special in the area. Um, they it's largely a typical farmland bird assemblage with linnet and yellowhammer, corn bunting, yellow wagtail. But having a tree sparrow population is quite nice. Those are within an established area of scrub, which will be retained throughout the development. But yeah, that's the only species that stands out for me, tree sparrow.
Thank you. John says, appreciates your professional judgment compared to mine, but I live in the area. And I think, any local insight or knowledge you're able to share with us as part of the consultation, things that you've seen around the site, what you consider to be common species and typical of the area would be very welcome, John. John is citing a section of the ecology chapter, so section 5.4.46. It might be that this is quite a detailed question. It might be that we need to come back to you in writing, John, but I will just read it out for the purpose of the recording. And also, Craig, if you did have any comments on it, that would be helpful. But if not, we can come back maybe in a bit more detail because it's very detailed. A couple of comments. So John says species. I think this is part of the ecology section. So species recognised as features on the nearby SPA designation have been recorded on the site during the winter period, including Berwick swan, hen harrier, and golden plover. though the numbers occurring within the site do not align with the designation thresholds, with a peak of 28 Berwick swans, 2,900 golden plover, and 1 hen harrier. Overall waterboard assemblage features (brackets, ducks, geese, and wading birds) have also been recorded. Acknowledged that the stated peak counts recorded within the site do not meet the SPA designation thresholds. However, what is not mentioned is that the UK wintering Berwick swan population has suffered a significant decline of 96% between 1998 to 2023, and the peak count of 28 represents 0.6% of the UK wintering population and represents one of only 2 regular wintering populations in Kent. Personal observations in the winter of 2025/26 recorded a total of 45 Berwick swans regularly using Walland Marsh.
Yep, that's all fine, and it's a HRA piece. It's about functionally linked land. I don't dispute any of that. The SPA designations are based on far long outdated figures on populations. So yeah, we're aware there is a Bewick swan herd within the area. They largely follow crop from our observations. And yes, they will be taken into account as part of our mitigation strategy, mitigating for wintering birds within the red line boundary, which is why at the moment we retain South Brooksea to give it back as winter bird mitigation. The idea is to improve an area that's stuck between 2 areas of SSI. Whether they'll one day meet SSI designation or not, it's to be seen, but it would be a good start. It'd be a nice location, big chunk of mitigation that could be turned over for them.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think just another comment about the tree sparrow. John agreeing tree sparrow is a very scarce farmland bird for Kent, and noting that the tree sparrow population is of county importance. So I'll just put those in.
Yeah, I think it's agreed and noted. We can build that in as part of our enhancements, some nest boxes, some better habitat management potentially for tree sparrow, winter forage opportunities, that sort of thing. That's all part of the course, I think. Goes hand in hand with solar, I think.
Thanks. And then a couple of follow-ups about Berwick swans. So the 45 Berwick swans representing over 1% of the national population. And then a comment saying, I hope the Berwick swan mitigation doesn't mean creating 2 potato fields.
Yeah, it likely won't. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another point, same reference, so section 5.4.46, and this is about wintering bird surveys. So again, if it's quite a detailed point about the ecology section, we can always come back in writing to John, but I'll read it out, and any comment you can initially give is helpful. So on the wintering bird surveys, those surveys have identified several fields within South Brooks A and E that support flocks of wintering wildfowl, brackets mainly grey lag geese, with smaller assemblages of lapwing and golden plover also observed. Water bodies adjacent to South Brooks A appear to host the majority of wintering bird interest, with large counts of wildfowl regularly having occurred between November 2023, when survey began, and March 2026. So I think that's a readout of that bullet point. So there's 3 questions from that paragraph, so I'll go through them in turn. So the paragraph states that smaller assemblages of lapwing and golden plover. In what context is smaller assemblage considered smaller?
Those are groups of less than 100.
Okay. Second question, what does wintering bird interest mean?
Oh, yeah, it's an area that's identified showing potential to support winter birds, to support birds through the wintering period. So an area might have winter bird interest if there's habitat suitable to sustain to birds through the non-breeding season.
Thank you. And the last question is the term large counts of wildfowl In what context are the counts considered to be large?
Yeah, I think that needs some quantification. They're not large at anything more than a local level, I would say. We're not got 5,000 ducks or anything like that. Um, we're talking a few hundred ducks. I think that needs some quantification when we get through to assessment.
Okay.
So that's a good point. I think the P or PL part, yeah, preliminary assessment. Um, yeah, it lacks a little bit of data around the quantification of winter birds. That's fair enough. We can quantify what's large, what's small, what's site, what's local, the levels of importance. We can do all that, and that will be done within the ES. And then we've also got another winter of data to capture. So all those thresholds may change anyway. So I don't want to nail our colours to the mast saying small is 100. We don't want to start with thresholds until we know what information we've got really, because that could all change.
Cool. Thank you. I think a couple of follow-ups from John there saying the wintering population of golden plover is in excess of 2,000, and these birds are using land within the zone of influence. So just a couple of comments, I think, on the back of comments that you've made.
Yeah, so we don't dispute 2,900 is a peak count within the site. There are many thousands within the potential zone of influence, but the potential zone of but our project isn't going to impact them out there. We just have to consider, SPAs within 20 kilometers or 10 kilometers or 30 kilometers for bats. We have to consider those things as potential zones of influence, and then we work down our impact pathways. We believe the impacts of golden plover would only occur within the site as loss of potential functionally linked land, and that's one of the main points we're going to pick up within the HRA.
Okay, thank you. Reptiles. So given that you acknowledge that suitable habitat exists for reptiles, why is there no survey for reptiles? How will you make a reptile population assessment to inform mitigation and identify areas where reptiles exist?
We consider there to be limited potential impacts for reptiles, that habitat loss wouldn't be one of them. We would be increasing the habitat available. So it would just be precautionary working method statements during construction phase. And operation, we're going to be providing a lot more habitat. So that's that one. We don't really see many impact pathways in arable landscapes.
Thank you. John says, how will your BNG delivery take account of the loss of skylark and yellow breeding territories? And in the case of skylark, wintering habitat and the loss of suitable land to support wintering barrack swans? Sorry.
So the two aren't to be conflated. BNG will be delivered as habitat, and some of that habitat may be useful for mitigation for those species. So, if you provision of grassland, rough grassland, may increase skylark potential, but we need to look at that once we've got a bit more design information. Though I think there's emerging evidence of solar farms sort of managed in South England actually being beneficial to breeding birds. So corn bunting was cited recently in British Birds as increasing, both coming into the site to forage on increased forage and nest success within. That's underneath panels, and then the betterment of the hedgerows and linear features within the landscape should also provide increased opportunity for nesting potential for yellowhammer, yellow wagtail, those sorts of things.
Yeah, sorry, that was John clarified he was talking about yellow wagtail when I just said yellow.
Yeah. It's one of those things. We're not there yet. We don't know what we're bringing through. It's not trying to dodge the question. It's just that I can't give specific answers because I don't know our layout, but we wouldn't want to. Yeah, we don't want to conflate the two issues. Species of principal importance and BNG are two different conversations.
Lovely, thank you. This is a comment I missed when we were talking about the buffers and standoffs. John agreeing should keep one term. The dual use was quite misleading, so noted, and hopefully that's helpful. John, I've certainly made a note of that. A question from Amanda. What do you define as well-managed solar sites that reduce harm to bioecology and biodiversity? What are the best practice measures that will ensure that this massive scheme with huge solar panels and industrial infrastructure won't deliver more harm than the benefits that the scheme could claim?
So it is things like betterment of the linear features, so the standoffs from the ecological features. So hedgerows, there'll be increased buffer zones to those standoffs to those hedgerows and linear features. So we would look to provide wildlife corridors throughout the scheme. Underneath the panels, we would use shade tolerant mixes, hoping to increase the botanical interest and then the species that follow that. So increased invertebrates and forage availability for many bird species, bats as well. Betterment within the ditch systems. So you'd look, when we're delivering BNG in that context, that would be beneficial for species within the ditches because we're adding more variation, where at the moment there's uniformity throughout the arable landscape. We would look to spread the solar panels so that light does reach the floor. I think there's a few examples we could all call upon where they look like chicken sheds and shade out a lot of the ground beneath them. That's not what we're aiming for here. We've got plenty of land available. So we want to, consider our impacts and mitigate for them accordingly.
Thank you. John, I missed, John had a follow-up to something I think we said earlier, and how do you know where they are? I don't know what that's in reference to, John, but if there is a question which you like to ask as follow-up, apologies, I missed that underneath the questions. Sorry about that, John. Amanda says, how will badgers... Oh, there's actually two questions, one from Amanda and one from Alan about mammal gates. So Amanda says, how will badgers that are present, especially in sites A and C, be protected and enabled to move in and out of the sites? Most wildlife access gates on solar farms are too small for badgers from what I have seen at other sites. And then Alan says, it's quite similar, do you plan to utilise the animal kept flaps currently employed at Cleve Hill to allow movement of ground wildlife within the sites?
Yeah, I mean, the sites are going to be fenced, but mammal gates would be built in so that, so to not include movement throughout the landscape. Obviously, badgers will be protected throughout construction from disturbance, and mammal gates will be provided throughout, so hopefully to not inhibit them.
And those, I think Amanda's saying that the ones at Cleve Hill and other solar farms would look too small for badgers, but
I don't know the specifics of those mammal gates, I'm afraid, but there would be sufficient mammal gates to allow mammals to move through the landscape. Without letting sort of people through, I suppose.
Fabulous. Emily says, when do we get more specific detail about all the mitigation that is going to be provided for these at-risk species?
So we're working on that. Once we have a design freeze and we understand our layout, we can then start to look at our enhancements. So that's within the developable area. And then cable routes as well. We're still working with Natural England and engineers to work out the best approach to the point of connection. So at the moment, because we can't say how we're going to do it, we can't say what it's going to do. So once we know how we're going to get through the shingle and the level of impact, we can then start to talk about the actual potential worst case scenario. We're looking at realistic worst case scenarios at the moment, but a lot of it hinges on like the practicalities of working within this landscape. So for example, the point of connection at Dungeness, is it going to be an open trench, moving lots of shingle, or are we able to horizontally directional drill under a lot of it to leave a lot of the landscape at ground level undisturbed? we don't know those answers yet, so we don't want to tell any fibs. So yeah, we're working with Natural England, and we've got ground investigations ongoing once we get SSI consent, so that we can then start to answer those questions. But yeah, it's design freeze, and then those engineering solutions. That's what's ultimately going to show us the scope of our assessment.
And SSI consent being a consent to work, carry out surveys in those SSI rather than consent to build
Yeah,
SSI, just to clarify.
yeah. So that's a Natural England consent. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
No,
That's
no, that's
we're
okay. Just
going. That's an ongoing process to try to get those ground investigations done. So it's a small consents.
yeah, and I think, Emily, the point at which those mitigations or information about the results of the assessment and the residual effects, and then what mitigation has been applied to reduce those as far as possible, will all be in the environmental statement, which is
Yes.
part of the development consent order application. We are targeting an early 2027 submission, so quite early on in next year. Quite a lot of the measures that we talk about as part of mitigation is in will be in a document called the Outline Landscape Ecology Management Plan.
Mm.
A draft of that is available as part of this consultation, so worth having a quick look if you haven't already at that document, which is on the website. Can be quite helpful to sort of see the types of things that we might be proposing, albeit Craig's work will decide what that final contents of that outline landscape ecology management plan would be.
Yeah, exactly. That was the how it's going to be provided. I was talking to when will we be able to, but yes, you're right. It will be
Yes,
presented in the ES.
two halves. Conscious of time, I know it's 7 o'clock. I've got 4 questions, and obviously any more sort of last ones that people would like to ask, please do. But I think we'll just take these in turn. So John asks, are you going to use reptile exclusion fencing?
In discrete construction areas, yes, it's likely that will be a solution. But at the moment, we don't know where those construction areas are going to be, so we don't know if they're within suitable habitat or not. But if they're within suitable habitat, yes, we will be looking at cautionary working method statements, which include
Thank you.
exclusionary fencing amongst other measures. Yeah.
Thank you. Amanda asks a bit about cumulative. So there will potentially be another 500 megawatt, 2,000 plus acre scheme right next to Southbrooks, that's
Mhm.
South Kent. How will the cumulative effect of both impact on your ecology, of both, sorry, I've said that wrong. How will the cumulative impact of both impact on your ecology and biodiversity assessments and assumptions?
Yeah, it's one of those things we'll have to take it into account as to where they're at when we're going through the assessment process. We're going to obviously consider them, but I can't answer specifically what ecological features would be impacted by them because I don't know the ins and outs fully of their development or the design, the final design of ours. At the moment, what we're actually presenting is maximum extents, so we might well shrink away from some of those things. But yeah, it's something we've got to consider once we have the information available, and at the moment, it's just not there to really answer that question, I'm afraid.
Yeah, more detail in the cumulative effects assessment.
Yeah.
It's probably at the DCI application stages.
Yes, exactly. It will be. Yeah, again, similar to the question before. Sorry, it will all be it will all be within the yes, but at the moment we don't have the information.
Thank you. Quite a comment from John saying that Skylark will use solar farms for foraging, but Skylark will not breed in solar farms.
I think it's emerging that they can and do use solar farms, and there's also going to be other mitigations which we deliver. So we sort of don't want to get too caught up on the Skylark issues at the moment before we can quantify the problem. But yeah, it's noted that they won't use. It's unlikely that they would use solar farms at the same density that they use open arable land, but we will be providing, increased permanent grassland, increased forage availability within the solar arrays, and there's also going to be buffer strips, buffer standoff, sorry, conservation headland type things, grassland provision. That's all going to be built in, but don't want to talk too much about Skylark Point because we've not quantified the problem yet.
Thank you. And then it was just John. I didn't catch his last comment, and he's just clarified. I think the question it related back to the species of principal importance, and I think we said you said that they were sort of captured in the habitats of principal importance surveys. John asked, how will you know where they are? And John clarified that was to do with knowing where harvest mouse, brown hare, and hedgehog are likely to be. The proposed development of the solar farm is likely to provide habitat unsuitable to support harvest mouse.
Unsuitable to support harvest mouse?
Yes.
So could you just repeat that last sentence? That didn't make sense to me.
So the proposed development of the solar farm is likely to provide habitat unsuitable to support harvest mouse.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's a question or a statement that's just telling me that the arable land is unlikely to support harvest mice, unless I've misinterpreted it.
It was in the context of not carrying out surveys of 4 species of principal importance.
So why haven't we done it? Have we considered it unsuitable to support harvest mice?
So why haven't we? If we're not going to do the surveys for species of principal importance, how will we know where they are?
How will we justify it? Okay, yeah, it's impact pathways. I think once we know a design and what we're looking at, arable margins. You'd need some long grass and arable margins, hedgerow margins, to support harvest mice rather than the open arable landscapes. And I don't expect them to be in the vegetated shingle, other than in the grassland elements. So yeah, it's once we quantify the problems, we can start to look at these things, but they'll all be set out within the scoping table of the ES. It's likely that we wouldn't do anything additional for harvest mice because we're not expecting an impact, but that would all be explained. And there's also going to be measures outlined there are already measures outlined within the OCEMP, so the Outline Construction Ecological Management Plan. So those are precautionary working method statements to avoid impacts on such things.
Thank you. John's just followed up saying the impact will be in the loss of arable crops. They live in the stalk zone.
Well, yeah, they can do. They can live in all sorts of habitats.
Thank you. Okay, I haven't got any more questions. I've just checked the inbox and I haven't got anything in there. So thank you for keeping with us a little bit over time. A really interesting discussion, and thank you for your interesting and very detailed questions. Appreciate that there might be more questions coming out of that, and if you do have any, I'm sure we would be very pleased to take those away and come back to you in writing. Amanda says, thank you, Craig and Rebecca. Thank you very much, Amanda, and everyone for joining us tonight. This is our last webinar. A recording will be made available shortly. And John says thank you as well. Very welcome. Thank you for your time again. And I hope you all have a very nice evening, and look forward to reading your consultation responses, which are due and be very much appreciated by 11:59 p.m. on Thursday, the 16th of July. So have a good evening all, and I'll draw this webinar to a close.